What is up, everyone? We're back here with another episode of The Fantasy Football Addicts. It's your host, Dawson here, joined by Mick and Wyatt. Wyatt's fortunately feeling a little bit better today, so he's able to join in on this video. So today we have another rankings video coming at you. Before we get started with that, if you like the video, make sure you go like it. Make sure you go subscribe. Go follow us on Twitter at The FF Addicts. Y'all know the drill. And with that being said, today we got our top 12 wide receiver rankings for full PPR. And this one's kind of hard because all the wide receivers after the top tier are very, very close together. So there's a lot of differentiation and a lot of different – that's the case across the industry. Like I looked at a lot of people's rankings and a lot of them are very different once you hit like the 6 through 12 ranking. So don't freak out when you see your favorite wide receiver is not number 3 or whatever. Don't freak out. There's a lot of really good receivers. So with that being said, let's get started. Y'all ready?
Let's do it.
I'm ready.
So if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen any of our previous rankings videos, first off, go check them out. And secondly, how we do these is we black them out so you can't see the whole list. And then we go down my rankings and then I reveal where Mick and Wyatt have them in theirs. And then we debate why someone should be higher or lower or why we have them where we do. So with that being said, let's do it. We got number 1 for my list, and the consensus number 1 throughout the industry is going to be a no-brainer for me, Michael Thomas. And it's clearly not a no-brainer for Mick and Wyatt. They have him at number 2, both of them. So let's just show number 2 as well because I have him as number 2. Y'all have him as number 1. We can debate why we switch them. Let me start. I think Michael Thomas and Devontae Adams are more of a 1A, 1B situation. I think it's way closer than a lot of people think it is. But I just think the volume that Michael Thomas gets, he put up insane numbers last year. I think Emmanuel Sanders coming in doesn't really hurt him. I mean, obviously a lot of targets are going to go to Emmanuel Sanders, but I do think that opens up the defense because there was literally just so many people covering Michael Thomas, and he still managed to put up the numbers he did. But now with Emmanuel Sanders on the other side, I think that opens up the offense a little bit more. It may take away a little bit more targets, but I think he'll be more efficient on those targets.
Yeah, I think it's crazy what Michael Thomas did last year. It was ridiculous. And I don't think it's repeatable. I don't care who it is. I don't think that's repeatable. You add Emmanuel Sanders. I think that Jared Cook is going to be getting more targets this year than he did before. And I think I said that in the last video as well. But really for me, it's Devontae Adams playing with Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers is going to have to play with his hair on fire. He's throwing 7,000 yards and winning an MVP this year. And if he's going to do that, he's going to need – don't laugh. That's serious. That's actually going to happen. Devontae Adams is going to have to be catching a ridiculous amount of yards this year, a ridiculous amount of catches. It's going to be the second year in a new offense. So they've hopefully worked out the kinks from last year. They should be able to feed Devontae Adams a ridiculous amount. They clearly trust him because they didn't draft any wide receiver help this year. So I think Devontae Adams is in for a huge year this year.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page. I'm not as high on Rodgers' performance as Mick is, but I think Adams' ceiling is just slightly higher, and the fact that I think the volume is going to even out this year between Thomas and Adams, and then on top of that, Adams can find the end zone, and there's no other options there. Sanders is going to take some of the targets this year. So give me Adams just because of the ceiling. Like if all the stars align and he plays perfectly, I think his ceiling for that is much higher than Thomas's. I think Adams could blow number 1 wide receiver out of the water this year.
I mean, how do you get a higher ceiling than the receptions record in NFL history?
Because
his yardage was limited. He could have had a lot more yards. Like
he had 1,700 yards. That's insane.
Yeah, but like I'm saying, the gap behind him, like his receptions was like so much higher than everyone else, and his yards were. I just think like if he was finding the end zone a lot and stuff, that's fine. But I do think Adams could potentially, be even better than Thomas was.
I just don't think the same amount of targets are going to be there as they were last year. And a lot of Michael Thomas's production came from Teddy Bridgewater. And we've talked. I think somebody on this channel has talked about how Teddy Bridgewater feeds number 1 a ridiculous amount. And Teddy Bridgewater will not be there this year. He's going to be playing with DJ Moore. So I don't think that Michael Thomas is going to get the targets. And I think Adams will get the targets.
Drew Brees does spread the ball around quite a bit too. Mm-hmm. But I do think that the volume is still going to be there for Michael Thomas. And the Packers are a very run-heavy team with that 300 backfield they got. But I do think it is a 1A, 1B situation either way, how you look at it. So it's going to take us to number 3. And I think we all have him the same, right? It's going to be Chris Godwin, wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he's a no-brainer for me this year. I think what he did last year was not a fluke. I think he is going to just solidify the fact that he's the better receiver between him and Mike Evans. I know that's going to get some pushback because a lot of people are worship Mike Evans for how talented he is and stuff like that. I do think he is talented, but Chris Godwin is just going to be perfect for that Tom Brady system, in my opinion. He's not super deep, just run down the field on long passes. He's more shorter completions and does the rest with his legs, and he's also a touchdown magnet, scores a lot of touchdowns. I think Tom Brady is going to love Chris Godwin, and you've heard it a ton of times if you watch the channel. He's going to be Julian Edelman 9.0 for Tom Brady this year, and I think there's no way he finishes outside the top 5.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I still think Mike Evans is more talented than Chris Godwin, but I think Godwin fits Tom Brady better than Mike Evans does. And Tom Brady is gone to Florida to party and throw a lot of yards this year because he could never party with Belichick, and he's never been able to throw like 7,000 yards like he wants to this year. He's not going to do it, but he's going to get pretty close to 5,000 this year, and I think Godwin is going to catch a lot of those.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Godwin's just kind of like the perfect – he's really reminds me a lot of Antonio Brown, and I just think he's the perfect receiver that Brady needs. I think Moss was a deep guy. That went really well whenever he got the chance to play with Brady, but I don't think Evans is going to be used that efficiently. And I think Godwin is just that perfect option for Brady. I think he's going to get utilized a ton in this offense. And Mike Evans is going to still have a solid role, but it's hard to beat Godwin, and I think – most people don't have him in that top tier. I definitely have him in that like 1C of this top tier for sure.
All right, that's going to take us to number 4, and that is Mr. Tyreek Hill, who is going at 5 on Mixed List and 4 on Wyatt's. And I'm not super high on Tyreek as far as where I have to draft him. I mean, I do think he's a good wide receiver. He's just a little too boomer bust for my fantasy team. I'm not big on super boomer bust wide receivers, but he is tied to, once again, Patrick Mahomes and that insane offense, and he's a great, great wide receiver. He's super fast, and I think he's perfect for that offense, and he's going to put up really good numbers. The only reason I have him a little bit below these other ones is because the whole Kelsey situation. I think Kelsey and him are kind of vying for those targets, and he's going to take a little bit of Tyreek's ceiling away. Well, I mean, Tyreek still does have a great ceiling, but the fact that Travis Kelsey is there, Kelsey might be the number 1 option. So I think that's why I have him slightly below the other 3.
Yeah, the only reason why I have him 1 lower than the rest of you all is because the dude ahead of him, Tyreek Hill, is insane. He's stupid fast, but when I look through his numbers, I see him having a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns every year, but his receptions are kind of low. That's because he's a big, deep threat, huge boomer bust guy, but that's what kind of scares me is in a PPR league, I want somebody who's going to catch the ball a lot, and I think that him not catching the ball a lot but getting a lot of yards puts him at 5 instead of 4 for me.
Yeah, I do think Tyreek Hill, his floor is a little lower than you'd like to see in these top tier guys, but his ceiling is just so high. So, like, yes, you might get 10 one week or, like, just high single digits because he catches, 4 passes for 40 yards. It gets held that week or whatever, but his ceiling will win you weeks alone, like 45 or whatever, a couple times a year. So, I mean, that's really what you're hoping, that your team is good enough to get into the playoffs. And when you do, that Tyreek Hill has one of those big weeks. So for me, as someone who like makes a ton of moves and puts in a ton of effort into a team, especially redraft, I think that's a must over the course of the season. Then I want someone like a Tyreek Hill who hopefully has a good matchup. And then once you get into that playoff spot, just has a huge week and wins you that week. I think that's what you're playing for. So I think his value is there if you are a good manager over the course of the season with your roster.
Yeah, the only problem I see with Tyreek is something you said. It's if your team is good enough, you have to hope your team is good enough that you can make it through those weeks where he kind of is down. The problem with Tyreek is you got to take him in the back half of the first, and that really, really knocks. Like, that's a good running back you can take, which those are the type of players that you need to take to kind of help you get through those weeks where the boomer bust guys don't hit. So
yeah, I think you want to be drafting Hill in the early half of that second round when it comes around that bend. And if you can manage to get an okay running back 1 and then snag Tyreek Hill 2, I think that more than
that's
makes
where I
up
would feel more
for
comfortable.
the late pick. Yeah, but I don't know if I'd take him early 1 or late 1.
Yeah, so that's going to take us to my 5th option and their 8th option, and that is going to be DJ Moore, the God, wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers. And I am so high on this man this year. Like we said, Teddy Bridgewater features the number 1 wide receiver. And I think the fact that they're getting this new coaching staff with Matt Rule and Joe Brady, this coaching staff is going to throw – we saw what Joe Brady did at LSU. He was with the Saints before that. He knows how to run a high-volume passing offense, and I think DJ Moore is going to be the focal point of that offense. Teddy Bridgewater is a quick get-it-out-of-the-hand kind of guy, doesn't like to throw it deep super often. He's pretty accurate. He's a very good, safe quarterback, and this is the type of guy that DJ Moore thrives with. DJ Moore isn't a burn the safety kind of guy. That's more of a Robbie Anderson or a Curtis Samuel job. DJ Moore is going to be the crossing routes, the little out routes, going to be a PPR monster this year with Teddy B. I think he's going to be kind of like Michael Thomas was with the Saints when Teddy Bridgewater was there. I think DJ Moore is in for a huge season this year. I can't see him finishing outside the top 8, and I think he's going to finish out the top 5. In the top.
Yeah, I have him a little bit lower because I was looking through his numbers, and his touchdown numbers aren't as high as I'd like him to be for me to have him in the top 5 or even any higher. And it's not a knock on DJ Moore because, like you said to start this, the making a wide receiver list is insanely difficult, and I could see him going up or down either way. So it's not like I don't like him. I think he's still a stud. I think he'll get a lot of yards, a lot of receptions with Teddy Bridgewater, but it's just hard for me to move him up on my list.
Yeah, for me, DJ Moore reminds me actually a lot of Tyreek Hill as far as kind of like the boomer bust. I think on less of a level, his ceiling's probably slightly lower and his floor is probably a little bit higher. So I guess more of like the safer pick, but I don't think he's going to – it's harder for him to win you a week, and you don't really know about that Carolina offense other than the fact that the ball is going to Christian McCaffrey an absolute ton, and that makes me a little nervous. Other than that, I like DJ Moore at the 8. Like Mike said, I could see him going up, down, but I think 8's right where his like soft landing spot of the middle is going to be. So I'm fine with that.
And that's going to take us to someone who's kind of getting disrespected in this list a little bit, but we have our reasons, and I'm sorry for all you Julio Jones fans out there, but I'm not really sorry because I'm the only one that actually put any sort of respect on this man's name because Wyatt doesn't even have him on his list. That is something that we are probably on our own with how much we're disrespecting Julio Jones because a lot of people have him in their top 4 this year. But, again, it's not anything against Julio Jones. I just think it's the fact that all these guys ahead of him, there's so many good wide receivers. All these guys ahead of them I think are in better situations and are going to outperform Julio. And I think Julio is kind of on that step towards the decline. I still think he's going to be a fantastic wide receiver. Obviously, number 6 is not bad. But I think we're going to start seeing him finish lower than his normal 1 through 4 spots. He's going to take a little bit step back to number 6. You guys have him up the face of the earth. So why is that?
For me, really, the Julio Jones thing is he is getting to that age where he starts declining. And I think this is the first year that we're actually going to see that. And I also have Calvin Ridley super high. I'm super high on Calvin Ridley this year, and I think that he surpasses Julio this year. I think this is the year that Julio passes the torch on to somebody else. And not only that is I think this is kind of a situation with like a Godwin and Mike Evans had last year where they're both like neck and neck, and Godwin just barely edged out Mike Evans to finish the season. And I think that this is going to be the same thing with Calvin Ridley and Julio. I think they'll be pretty close, but I think Calvin Ridley just edges them out.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think Ridley's going to break out this year and be kind of like the alpha. I think Julio's going to be – what's a good comparison? Like Marvin Jones Jr. to Kenny Golladay almost, where he could have big weeks, and I think he'll be more involved than Marvin Jones obviously is. But I don't see him being a top 10 guy this year. I think it's possible, but I think for a guy that old, that at receiver, I think he could just like fall off a cliff, especially if Ridley's able to take over and playing at a high level. So, yeah, I didn't make this list for me. I will also say that our leaderboard says top 10 wide receivers, but it is top 12.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, there you go. Good catch there.
Restart the whole thing.
Yeah, I got it.
Good catch there. Yeah, it was originally supposed to be a top 10 video, but we just could not figure out the top 10. We had so many people in the 8 through 12 range. We had to make it top 12. So with that being said, I do think that Calvin Ridley is going to take a step forward this year. So I do see y'all's argument for dropping Julio a little bit. I just think Julio's still got to be a top 6 for me. Moving to number 7 is another guy who y'all haven't seen his name on this list. You're probably like, what the heck are y'all doing? And it's DeAndre Hopkins. And DeAndre Hopkins is a fantastic – I think he's a top 2 to 3 talent in the league. I think he's obviously a fantastic wide receiver. It's just the whole – for me, why he's down at number 7 is he's going to a new offense. I don't like wide receivers that go from one offense to another, let alone during the year where the guys aren't allowed to interact with each other for several months at a time. So this whole COVID thing, we talked about how the rookie wide receivers are a little bit more risky because of COVID-19. And DeAndre Hopkins, while he's not a rookie, is in a totally new system. And that system is very complex with Cliff Kingsbury over there. He has a crazy offensive system. And I think while his volume is still going to be high for that offense, I just don't think DeAndre Hopkins is going to be as efficient as he has been in the past years. I don't know if he's going to be on the same page with Kyler. It's a lot of question marks for me. I do think he's still a fantastic talent, which is why I see him in the top 7. So y'all have him a slightly bit higher than I do.
So I have him one notch higher than you, and I think I wanted to have him higher, really, but I looked at his numbers last year, but he started declining last year. Like, his numbers were not the same. The year before, he came off of the season where he had no drops, and last year he had like 3 or 4. And that could be a fluke, and it could maybe the year where he had no drops was a fluke. But I think that DeAndre Hopkins clearly showed signs of regression last year. He is going to a new offense, and the reason why I don't have him any lower is because I think he is going to want to prove that Bill O'Brien is the biggest idiot on the face of the planet. So he's going to want to ball out. That offense, like you said, is complex, but it is a very great offense that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be put into. Yeah, it's going to take a minute for him to get up to speed in that offense, but I think he's going to be insane in that offense once he gets going. I hope that the last year's season of his little bit of a regression was just a fluke, but I think that he's going to come back and just prove everybody that Bill O'Brien's an idiot.
Yeah, my thing with DeAndre Hopkins' situation is very interesting, but I will say his talent, I think, is second to none in the NFL. I think his ability to go up and catch the ball with the defender there one-on-one is better than anybody else in the NFL. That's just my opinion. The dude's an absolute freak. So he got interviewed, and he basically said that he was the best wide receiver in the league, and that wasn't really demonstrated because of quarterback play. So he's basically blaming it on Deshaun Watson, which we know obviously that's probably just some frustration there, but just Watson's a great quarterback. But Bill O'Brien was just hammering that offense in the foot, making it unable to function. And I think Hopkins realized that he was getting frustrated being on a team that just couldn't push over the edge because that coach was holding him back, in my opinion. Like, they were just never going to be great. So now he gets to go on a team where you have a guy in Kyler Murray who is a true talent. And I was really concerned in his situation that he was going to try to use his talent too much and get himself hurt. Here, I think Hopkins is the perfect balance for what they need. He's going to be the guy where if Kyler Murray just needs to throw it up real quick because he's running around, doesn't have any, Hopkins is that guy. And they're also going to draw him up plenty of plays. I think he's getting a ton of receptions. He's going to find the end zone a lot. I think you're going to get a lot of fades on the outside corner as soon as they get inside the 5 or 10, whatever. I think he's going to be an absolute animal. I think it works out perfectly. I think there's a slight chance that it's not everything you want year one. And yes, this is redraft, but I think the possibility they could be, the best wide receiver quarterback combo in the league if it's done right.
Yeah, I definitely see where, like, you combine that, if everything works right for him, you combine his insane talent with that high-powered offense.
It could be
his ceiling is
insane.
high. It's just switching. I think next year is where I will love DeAndre Hopkins because it's just a new offense. That's going to take us to a guy that I wish with all my heart I could have had higher. I think just my respect for Julio and Hopkins, the OGs, kind of took precedent here is why I had him a little higher. But I think Kenny Golladay could easily outscore both of those two this year. And I love Kenny Golladay mainly because I love Matthew Stafford. If I'm going to love Matthew Stafford and he's going to be one of my top 5 quarterbacks, I have to love Kenny G, right? Kenny G is his number 1 option. I think he has a perfect complement in Marvin Jones Jr. on the other side. I think that offense is going to be better than it was last year. And I think Kenny Golladay is a fantastic wide receiver, good talent. I just think he's in a good spot to outperform his ADP this year. So I have him in the top 8.
Yeah, I think Kenny Golladay came off of a crazy good year last year. And for half the year, his quarterback was David Blow. So Kenny G is an absolute stud. I think he's in a high passing volume offense. And I just think that it's hard for me to say that Matthew Stafford's going to be a goon this year without having Kenny G in my top 5 because, I mean, Dawson had Matthew Stafford as a top 5 quarterback this year. And if he's right about that. Kenny G has to be a top 5 receiver because most of what's going to Matthew Stafford is going to be throwing is going to Kenny G. Marvin Jones is another year older, and I think he's like 30 or 31. So he's pretty close to the apex. Like Dawson said in another video, I think that he said that the apex was 32. So if Marvin Jones is reaching there, he's going to start coming down pretty soon. And if he starts coming down, Kenny G is only going up because Kenny G is far younger than Marvin Jones. So I just think Kenny G is in for a huge year again. I think top 5 is easy for me, but it is also hard to make these receiver lists.
Yeah, I've always had a soft spot for Kenny Golladay because I think it was his rookie year. Everyone has the rookies that hit and miss. He's the one that hit for me and helped me actually have a pretty solid team. So I've just always kind of enjoyed him. I think that offense has been pass only for a long time because they can't run the ball. And now they have Swift and Carry On, which I think could open up the run game. It could also totally collapse just like the run game always does. I think if it collapses, that's fine because they're still a pass-first offense, and they always will be. Or they could run the ball a little bit, and the teams have to respect the run then, and that helps Golladay out even more. People always say that Marvin Jones is comparable in good draft value, which he is, because he gets the average same points per game as Kenny Golladay. Well, no, not really. Yes, because he has 2 games a year where he has like 45 points and catches 4 touchdowns and just absolutely goes off. But a lot of the games he's getting like 7 to 10 points and not doing great, while Golladay is getting about 20 a week. I just think he's Stafford's guy, and Stafford can let it loose. We're high on Stafford as a unit this year, so love Kenny at the 7.
Another thing I'd like to add in is that there was rumors that the Lions were going to take another quarterback this year in the draft, and Matthew Stafford, I know he heard all that, and he probably wants to prove himself so they don't draft another quarterback this coming year because there's some good quarterbacks coming out this year, and I think that the Lions are going to suck and get towards the top end of the draft, and I think he might be a little bit worried that they're going to take a quarterback.
Hey, Stafford stock's going up even more. So that's going to take us to number 9 for me and number 7 for Mick, and not on Wyatt's list, Allen Robinson. And Allen Robinson has quietly last year put together, I think, a wide receiver 7 season, wide receiver 8 season last year with one of the probably top 5 most atrocious quarterback plays in the league last year. And he still was managed to put a top 10 receiver season together. And they don't add anyone in that offense to catch passes besides their 44 tight ends. I think Allen Robinson is going to be wide receiver 1 on that team. Obviously, he's going to be whoever's quarterback, Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles. That offense is going to improve, like we've said. And I think that just increases Allen Robinson's chance for touchdowns, increases his chance to be more efficient. And while that offense is going to be better, I still don't think that team is going to be dominating the league by any means. So I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit. I don't think they're going to be able to just run the clock out a lot. So I do think Allen Robinson is going to be a top 10 season once again. He's a fantastic wide receiver.
Yeah, I have him on the list. He finished wide receiver 8 last year. I got him at wide receiver 7 this year, just because I do think that offense will improve. Even if it's just by a little bit, I think it helps Allen Robinson a lot. Even if Nick Foles comes in, or if Mitchell Trubisky learns how to play football or something like that. I don't know. I guess that makes too much sense, but I think Allen Robinson is going to have a little bit of a better year than he did last year. He is a very talented wide receiver, and I think he's been disrespected over the last couple of years.
I think the Bears might be the worst team in the NFL this year. I think that's very possible.
With that defense?
Even with that
Bears
defense.
Stink.
And I don't think that this offense getting better helps Allen Robinson, and I know that sounds bad, but like Mitch Trubisky couldn't hit the sea from the beach last year, and he still just shoved it to Allen Robinson. I think that them getting better means the ball's moving a little bit better for this offense. But I think the defense is going to be great, and just do enough to keep the teams from pulling away. So they're going to lose a lot of 1-2 touchdown games. But I think it's going to be a lot of terrible game management from the Bears, and probably Nick Foles once he becomes a starter, because I think he will, and I think it'll happen soon. And then I think you're going to have a bunch of mediocre fantasy options everywhere. Yes, Allen Robinson will be decent, but I don't think he'll be top 10. Because Foles will throw to him 5 times, and then Cohen 5 times, and they're going to run the ball a bunch, and it's going to go for 3 yards a carry. And it's going to be a lot of slow, boring football to watch, and it's not going to be great for fantasy. I think Allen Robinson's just he's still going to be good. I just don't think he's going to be a top 10 guy. I don't like him in whatever. I don't see a situation where that offense fluctuates or runs fluently enough to where Allen Robinson's a top 10 guy.
Interesting. Let's take it down to number 10 for me and number 11 for Wyatt. And not on Mick's top 12 is Adam Thielen. And the only reason I have him this high, I mean, Adam Thielen's been a fantastic wide receiver until last year when he got hurt, except for those injuries. But before that, he was a top 10 wide receiver. And this year they lose Diggs. I think he is going to see a stupid amount of volume, like just absolutely insane, upwards of 150 to 160 targets probably. So I think he is going to put up great numbers. He's going to be the safety blanket for Cousins once again. And I think he's just going to have so much volume that he's going to be a top 10 wide receiver this year.
Yeah, I don't have them on my list because I think the Vikings are going to be a run-first team. They have a really good defense, and I think that they're going to win games by running the clock out and playing good defense. And Adam Thielen, I mean, last year, Stephon Diggs was not very good. I mean, he was good. He had like his weeks where you're just like, oh my God, who is this guy? And then he would have weeks where it's just like he didn't even show up, like he didn't even come to play. I think Adam Thielen's isn't as much of a boomer bust guy, but to compare his yards to, I just don't think he's going to play all that well. He is actually a lot older than I thought he was. I think he's like in his 30s now. So he's also getting close to the decline. And I don't believe in Kirk Cousins. I think he's straight poo.
I think Kirk Cousins is decent. He's very I don't know, Romo-esque or whatever. And that's fine. I think he'll get the job done. But I think Justin Jefferson is going to play a solid role in that offense. Volume alone is going to make him decent. And I think that he is going to kind of step out early as kind of like a rookie to be known. And I think there's already some eyes on him. And that's going to take attention away from Thielen, which I think he's going to need because he's going to have so many targets. And that's going to help him out. And I also just think the dude's a stud. And they're going to run the ball a lot. And the teams are going to have to respect the run with Cook, at least until he gets hurt. So I don't see a situation where Thielen's not getting, help from somewhere. So, I really like him this year.
I totally agree with that. So that's going to take us to my number 11, and not on Nick's list once again, but Wyatt's number 10 is my man, Robert Woods. Y'all know I love Robert Woods. The loss of Brandon Cooks opens up a lot of targets. I think they have a top 10 targets, maybe 11th most vacated targets in the league. I think that offense is going to be better than last year. They're going to run a lot of 12 personnel, like we've said, and that's going to kind of push Cooper Kupp to the outside where he might not excel as much as he used to in the slot. I think Robert Woods is going to become the alpha in that offense. I actually just recorded a player profile on Robert Woods, so if y'all want to see in-depth breakdown on Robert Woods, we'll talk about him in a player profile coming out very soon, so keep your eye out for that one. Mick, why don't you have him on your list?
It's the touchdowns for me. I mean, last year he finished with 2 touchdowns. That's just simply not enough to be a top 12 wide receiver. He just scares me. I just don't think that Robert Woods is going to see as much volume as everyone thinking. Sean McVay said that he wants to run a 4 running back committee. And as much as I don't believe that to be true, that just tells me that he wants to run a ball a lot. I think that's code language for I'm going to run the ball 40 times a game. And I just don't think that Robert Woods is going to get the volume everybody's expecting.
So for me right now, those memes on Twitter or whatever about sports players, it's like talent, work ethic, and then recognition. Yeah. That's Robert Woods for me. Like, you could be an actual fan of the NFL and like watch all the games and still not know who Robert Woods is. And I think that's crazy. Like, he is just not a flashy name. I don't know how he flies so far under the radar. But the dude is an absolute stud. I think, yes, 2 touchdowns last year is not great, but I think that's only room for improvement. I think their formation, their style of play this year is going to help Woods. I think Kupp is going to be still a solid player, but I think Woods is really going to take over as the go-to guy in key situations. And he just has these games where he's very like Tyreek Hill-esque. He just takes over. Kupp's the same way, but I mean, Robert Woods is just an absolute animal. I think 10, even looking at it now, I might make a case to bump him up higher. I think he's going to be a consistent goon this year. And I think like 15 a week might be the low end for him.
I totally could not agree more with that, Wyatt. Let's take that to number 12 for me, and that is going to be Mike Evans, who Mick has at 9 and Wyatt has at 6 as a typical Brady fan. You know he's going to love those Brady wide receivers. So
not only is he a Brady wide receiver, but he is a Texas A&M man.
Yeah, he's an Aggie too, so that's bad news for Wyatt.
We love that, yeah.
So anyways, Mike Evans, I have him lower than a lot of people do, just solely because I have Godwin so high. I think Evans is going to become the clear number 2 instead of the number 1. And I think Brady's just going to love Godwin a lot more than he does Evans. We've talked about it a ton of times. Evans is just not Brady's style receiver. So I think Evans is going to kind of take a step back this year, and he's still a top 12 for me. So I don't think he's not going to bust by any means, but he's just not going to be. I'd much rather have Godwin in that offense.
Yeah, I would rather have Godwin too, and that's why I have Godwin at 3 and Mike Evans at 9. I think Evans is still going to be catching a lot of touchdowns this year, and I think that Mike Evans is going to be more. I mean, he's played like 6 or 7 years in the NFL, and not once has he had less than 1,000 yards. So I think that's got to be at least his floor, because he's never proven to me that he's going to catch less than that. And I think he's going to have an insane amount of touchdowns this year. And Brady, like I said, he's in Florida to party and throw 5,000 yards. So I think that if he's going to throw 5,000 yards, he needs Mike Evans to catch some of those.
Yeah, Mike Evans, like you said, he's locked in for 1,000 yards. I don't doubt that. I think Brady is there to, like you said, party and throw for 5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns. If he's throwing for 45 touchdowns, I'm saying like 15 of them are going to Mike Evans. I'm okay with that. On top of 1,000 yards, the man's an absolute animal. I think Godwin's going to get the between the 20s work a lot more, but I think Evans is going to look Moss-esque back in the 18-0 days. And when Brady wants to let it loose, he's going to Mike Evans. And Mike Evans is not only sticking up for himself and his teammates on Twitter, but I think he's going to do it on the field this year too. And he's going to make some quarterbacks and some safeties look real silly.
Yeah, I just think Mike Evans is a fantastic talent, which is why I have to have him in the top 12. So that's going to take us to a guy that it absolutely pains me I don't have him in the top 12, because, we're all in on him this year. But I just couldn't do it. I think he's number 13 for me. So Calvin Ridley, I love him. He's just not in my top 12. He is in y'all's, so y'all talk about him.
Yeah, I have him ahead of Julio, but like I said before, I think him and Julio are going to be like neck and neck, and Ridley's just going to itch him out for a little bit higher than Julio. So I have Calvin Ridley pretty high. It's going to be an insane breakout year for him.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on Ridley than I think Mick is, surprisingly, as far as how I think this Falcons offense goes this year. I think Ridley steps up as, I'm the young guy, I'm the go-to, give me the ball. I think Julio is probably going to find the end zone a little more this year, maybe on like first downs. They throw in some earlier ones because he's like on his way out, I guess. Not really, but not really. I don't know. I think the atmosphere as a whole inside that stadium is going to be like, this is the guy now. Like, he's taken over. So I think that's why he just bumps Julio off this list for me. I think that, 4,200 yards for Matt Ryan, a lot are going to Ridley. I think he's seeing a ton of targets this year. He's going to be great in all formats. And I think he's going to find the end zone a lot and make a lot of plays with his athleticism. So,
yeah, I'm really torn between those two. I think it's going to be very close. I have to put the respect on Julio's name one more time, one more year. After that, I'm going to have Calvin Ridley probably higher, depending on how the season goes. So with that being said, that is going to take us to number 11 for Mick, and someone who I have very close as well, who I like this year, just didn't quite crack my top 12, is A.J. Brown, wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. Love A.J. Brown this year. I just think that offense is just not high enough passing volume for me quite yet, so that's why he's not in my top 12.
Yeah, I really wanted to have AJ Brown higher because I'm super high on him, and I took him in Dynasty, or I traded a lot to get him in Dynasty leagues, but I couldn't do that because of Tannehill and that offense. But like I said before, AJ Brown had identical images of Julio Jones's stats in his rookie year, and I think that this year he's going to continue to improve upon that. I think he had like 900 to 950 yards last year. I think he's easily in the 1,100 yard range this year. I think his touchdowns go up this year. I just really like AJ Brown. Kind of wanted to have him higher, but it's really hard. I could see him go lower too. It's just hard at this range of the wide receivers. It was hard to not.
Very tough.
Yeah, for me, my value on wide receivers comes solely from like their the offense around them and their quarterback situation. And I think with Tannehill, it's just not it. The volume's just not there. I think Henry is obviously going to have a huge workload this year. I think production-wise, he takes a step down, but he's going to get a ton of carries. And that's basically it's just going to be game management from Tannehill and trying not to lose games with his arm. And Brown, if he was in another offense, I'd be all over him. I think he's super talented. I think he'll still be and could be a top 10 guy or top 12 guy this year if, the dice just roll that way and he catches a lot of long passes like throughout the season. But I think he's got the potential. I just don't love the situation. So he just didn't make the top 12 for me in this list.
Yeah, the other thing I'd like to add is when A.J. Brown started to produce a lot last year, it was when Tannehill took over. So I'm expecting more of the same.
That is going to take us to Wyatt's number 12, someone who didn't quite crack my top 15 probably, is Odell Beckham Jr. And Wyatt, tell us why.
I mean, Odell's one of the best true talent receivers in this league. I don't doubt that for a second. And I don't think he's done as far as like being a peak guy in his career. I think 12 might even be a little low. I think he could be a lot higher. I think this Browns offense figures it out. I don't think Baker's the most accurate quarterback in the world, but I think Odell's ability to grab the ball from literally anywhere is what's going to make him a pretty solid wide receiver option this year. The offense breaks out. Those running backs are going to be utilized a ton. Yes, there's a lot of weapons, but I think Odell can take over. I think he just might. I think Baker is going to – he knows this is a rough year for him. So it's make or break. And then I think if he finds something with Odell early, he's just going to absolutely roll with it throughout the season. So I think Odell could see 15 targets a game this year because Baker knows he's got to be successful. I think Odell's going to give him that opportunity.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I wanted to have Odell up there, but like I said, it's really hard to put everybody you would like to have in the top 12 because at the end of the day, you can only have 12 of them. And I think Odell was somebody who I really wanted to have in there because I do think he's going to have a pretty good year this year. And I think Baker Mayfield takes a step forwards and Freddie Kitchens is gone. So I really wanted to have him up there. I just couldn't.
So, guys, this was our top 12 wide receiver lists. And as you can see, it was very hard. We did have some disagreement, but I do like everyone's list. That's the thing about these wide receivers. I see an argument for everyone on these lists to finish in the top 12. And I see an argument for about 4 or 5 other guys to put in the top 12. So what we're going to do is next week, we're probably going to come out with our 13 through 24 rankings as well to show you kind of, because that's where it really gets debatable is within that 10 through 20-ish range is where it's going to get real debatable and it's going to be real different for all of us. So it's going to be a really fun video. So if you liked this video, let us know in the comments below. Let us know whose list you liked better. Let us know what kind of videos you want to see in the future. Make sure you leave a like if you like the video. Go subscribe to the channel. Go follow us on Twitter at the FF Addicts, the usual stuff. Thank you all so much for watching another episode of the Fantasy Football Addicts. Deuces.
Draft Clyde.
Draft Mims.